All right. So Brittany, take it away.
Perfect. I will. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for giving us a few minutes to get connected here. But as you know, this is our September forum. I'm Brittany McLean. I am the new VP of Professional Development, and I've also got Heather and Christine on my team who are going to be helping today as we go through the presentation. We're really excited to have Tim Conway with us from PatCraft, and a big thank you to them for being the sponsor of today's presentation. For those of you who did sign up to get the CEU credit, you should have entered that information when you registered with Eventbrite, and you will be getting an email probably in the next week or so following the presentation confirming that. Christine's going to be helping to make sure you guys get that. So if you do have any questions or forgot to put in your number, reach out to Christine and she can get you all set up with that. Also, just so you know, you've been put on mute automatically, but as we go through the presentation, if you have questions that you have for Tim that you'd like us to ask during the Q&A, you can drop those in the chat and we'll kind of hold on to those. Or if you prefer, to ask, we can let you unmute yourself once we get to that Q&A, and Heather's going to be rolling with that. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Christine, if you want to give an introduction of our guest speaker today.
Yeah, well, welcome everybody. I'm excited to introduce you all to Tim Conway. Tim is the Vice President of Sustainability for all of Shaw Industries. That includes PatCraft. So, and actually Tim began his career out here in Portland, Oregon as an account manager for PatCraft. So we're really excited to have him back joining us today. And I would say that this is probably where the passion for sustainability began for him, was here in Portland. So it's great to have him come discuss that with us. Tim's expertise has allowed him to speak at Greenbuild, Living Future Conference, Clean Med, and other major conferences. He's also heavily engaged with wellness programs such as Mindful Materials, and is involved with Healthcare Without Harm, the Healthy Hospital Initiative, and the Healthy Campus Initiatives. He's very passionate about collaborating with his clients to develop flooring specifications that are safe throughout the product's entirety supply chain, from chemical ingredients to the end of service reclamation. So we're really excited to have him here today and to discuss this with you all. Tim, I'm gonna let you take it on from here. So thank you for joining us.
Sounds good.
And let me just switch over to the PowerPoint real quick and we will get this going. There we go. All right.
There we go. So nice to virtually see everyone. Hopefully there's some of my old friends from when I was in the industry in Portland, Oregon. So my name's Tim Conway. I manage the sustainability initiatives for the commercial divisions at Shaw. And it's my role to try to translate what we do as a manufacturer to help our customers achieve their goals. Maybe it's a goal because you work for a leader called Sarah or ZGF or Anchor Moisen. Maybe it's a project goal that you're working on, or maybe it's hopefully just your personal values that you try to translate into your professional life. So a lot of pressure as you are in Portland, Oregon, and I've been looking forward to this for quite some time. So I've been with this company for 26 years, and it's safe to say that we didn't have a VP of sustainability 25 years ago when I took this job in Portland. But I would say that I wouldn't be where I'm at today in my career unless I grew up professionally in Portland. So I moved to Portland, Oregon, something like 1994. This thing called LEAD came into my world, and I got addicted to that. I was learning from leaders like Elaine I and Ralph Nicola, and Clark Brockman and Sarah, and learning from leaders like Bill McDonough, who's been a mentor to me. So the reason that I'm giving this presentation today and the reason that I'm in this job today is because I worked for the right company, but I learned from the right people in the right market. That was Portland. So on to the CEO. So this is the next normal. I'm going to do my best to talk about where we've been as an industry, where we're at today as an industry, and hopefully where we can all move to. And if you think about this, this would have been really easy, like 20 years ago when I was in Portland. If you were talking to a manufacturer and you asked a question about sustainability, it was one question. You'd say, hey, how much recycled content do you have? Well, we answered, we delivered, and that's how we measured our value. So if you think about where we're at today, right? Every day we are in an industry, whether it be a manufacturer, design professional, that we are in an industry today that the choices that we make have the ability to participate in some of the biggest challenges that we face collectively as a global society. Who would have thought that every day that when we go to work, we could make choices around our collective fight against climate change, diversity, equity, inclusion, waste, human health and well-being, right? So that's where we're at. But where are we going, right? How do we start? What is next? How do we change the way that we make things, and you can change the way you design spaces, and we can start to change the impacts that we share? Where we've been is we've looked at a building as a whole, right? A LEED certified building, a WELL certified building. We have looked at how do we look at the operational sustainability of space and design, right? We've been to the moon and back several times, and we'll continue to innovate there. But where I think we're at today and where we're going is, what about the occupational sustainability? Because the most important asset in every space that's ever been designed is not an investment in real estate, it's an investment in the people in that space. So like it or not, we've become an indoor species. We spend 90% of our time indoors. So if you want to know what your indoor air age is, take your age, times it by 0.09, and in your life, that's how much time you spend indoors. So how do we start to think about the product human impacts of how things are made and how things are designed, and start to address some of these challenges collectively and change the way we work together? So let's go to the next slide. So this is a CEU, so I hope you learned something. The first thing is, like, what's happening around us? Like, what's happening in this shift around sustainability, where we just thought about recycled content, to health and well-being, and to climate change? And then next is, how do we translate that through the material choices that we make? How do we get into these conversations? To do that, we're going to take a deep dive into the Cradle to Cradle Certified Products Program. I promise you, I'm going to do my best not to talk about the science or the bottom line of Cradle to Cradle, but the storyline and the design signals of Cradle to Cradle. And then how does that fit into these owners' motivations around LEED and WELL building certifications? We can go to the next one. We're going to break this down into 4 chapters. Talked about the why. It's what drives us every day. That's what challenges us to do things maybe differently, right? To change. We're going to talk about how do we change the way that, not that we work, but change the way that we work together. And then what tools are in the industry to simplify this practice. And then we're going to celebrate some leaders in industry that are doing this work. So let's go to the next one. So when I think about the next normal, think about where we've been, where we're at. How do we start to challenge ourselves, right, to change the way we work together? How do we get beyond the practice of simply just asking about product transparency? Hey, I want to see the ingredients, to taking a deeper dive into the human health impacts of all of those ingredients. How do we move beyond just asking for recycled content to start specifying into circular economies and eliminating the concept of waste in buildings? And if there's one thing we get from this, how do we get out, and by the way, I'm guilty of this too, but how do we get out of the practice of chasing acronyms? Checkbox HPD, checkbox EPD. How do we get out of the practice of chasing points in building programs? How do we get out of the practice of chasing those so that we can start chasing impacts and outcomes collectively? How do we start to address the impacts and outcomes of how we work together? We can go to the next one. So let me see if this sounds familiar. I think we are really, really good as an industry to say, these are our standards. This is what we do. This is what we've done. If there's one thing we have maybe recycled the most in our industry, is repeating the behavior that got us to where we're at right now. So when we think about product standards, I'm not saying change this, right? We talk about product standards, we talk about design, we talk about budget, we talk about performance, installation, speed to market. Those are all really important. Don't stop doing that. But why does it seem like our product standards conversations and our human standards conversations sometimes might not be on the same page? Sometimes there's a perception that our human standards may cost more, may perform at a lower level, may have risk to them. So how do we get into conversations of how we work together so that our product standards and our human standards are not in conflict with one another? It's not an and or a both. It is just good design. So let's go to the next slide. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes to get these things called these acronyms, these cradle to cradle things. And I just wanted to maybe look, I don't know if anybody's heard of the Green Science Policy Institute, but Arlene Bloom in Northern California has made your coat that you get at US outdoor stores safer. She's made flooring safer. She's made furniture safer. And it's about chemicals. Right? We said, we asked for HPDs, we asked for cradle to cradle, but what about the impacts of these chemicals? So really quick, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's 86,000 chemicals that are part of our lives every single day. 60% of those chemicals introduced into our lives since World War II. Another 20,000 introduced into our lives since 1994. 2,000 chemicals introduced in this past 2.5 years of craziness. Does anybody know how many have been banned? Only 5. So how do we address that? So what Arlene Bloom has done is taken those 86,000 chemicals and created the 6 classes of chemicals that we need to avoid, right? So whether it be PFAS, stain treatments, orthophthalates, and polyvinyl chloride, she's bucketed these 86,000 chemicals into these 6 classes that we need to avoid. What do these 6 classes do? They feed programs like Cradle to Cradle, like Declare, like HPD. So Arlene Bloom has created the awareness and simplified it through these 6 classes. And then that work feeds the Healthy Building Network with Bill Walsh and his team. And they have been connected with LEED since day one in USGBC. In fact, Bill claims that in the Healthy Building Network, in the latest version of LEED 4.1, that 71% of all the points within LEED directly tie back to public health. So we're doing this work, right? These things are out there. Then you have organizations like Healthcare Without Harm. Right? So think of leaders like Kaiser Permanente in your market. Healthcare Without Harm is an organization of scientists, toxicologists, chemists, supply chain specialists that are hired by 14 of the largest healthcare systems in the country. They'll say, hey, we want you to dive into our IV bags, into this industry, eliminate these 6 classes of chemicals. And then when we do this, we're going to purchase these materials. So they've done this with furniture. They've done this with flooring. And now there's a Healthcare Without Harm Green Health approved product certification that lets you know that these materials have eliminated these 6 classes of chemicals. So there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes to bring awareness to us as manufacturers and design professionals. You have more building programs like Living Building Challenge, create the red list. Here's a list of my ingredients. It's not these 24. Let's talk about material health. Then we got building programs like Fit Well and Well that aren't focusing on the operational sustainability of the building, but to the occupational wellness and the occupational sustainability of those people in those buildings. Let's go to the next one. And by the way, like it or not, I'm a manufacturer, you're a design professional. Like it or not, we are in the wellness industry. It's a $6 trillion industry. Hard pressed to find any industry today that isn't have a dotted line or connected to wellness. You know, think about this. Books like this weren't around when I was starting in the Healthy Workplace. This book from Dr. Joe Allen, Healthy Buildings, came out about 2 years ago. And there's a couple quotes that really stick out from Dr. Allen's quotes in Healthy Buildings. And he's at Harvard. The quotes were that your building manager has a greater impact on your health and well-being than your doctor. And that our spaces, our environments, have a greater impact on our health and well-being than our genetics. So if it's true, we have become an indoor species. The materials that we specify have a direct impact on the health and well-being of our occupants. And we hear this from you, right? And good news, we don't only hear it from Portland, Seattle, and San Francisco. These conversations are all over the country today, right? We're starting to think about our human standards and asking questions to say that we'd like to not see PFAS stain treatments or orthophthalates in our products. So we are moving forward collectively. We can go to the next one. So how do we create this next? We're not going to change the impacts and the outcomes until we change the way that we work together. How do we start to ask questions that aren't just checking boxes to say that, do you have cradle to cradle HPDs, but start talking about questions that really address climate change, that really address circular economy, that really address health and well-being? Our first step is that we need to change the way that we practice and communicate our values together. So let's go to the next one. So how do we bake this into the way we work? We think about buildings, but buildings are made up of hundreds of thousands of different materials. All of those materials have some kind of impact. What is it? Well, we don't know unless we ask, right? Last time I checked, asking questions is free. So how do we start to ask questions not only about the product standards, but also the human standards of how we practice? We can go to the next. So think about this with material health, 86,000 chemicals, right? Now we have these 6 classes of chemicals. Now we know that we can move from a chemical avoidance strategy to say that we want materials that don't have these. Let's talk about materials that aren't doing less bad, but materials choices that are doing more good. Indoor air quality. So I talked about Dr. Joe Allen. Dr. Anna Young, who works for Joe, released a study about 1.5 years ago. So she's at Harvard. They're obsessed with material health and building materials, where she did a research and she went into 41 different spaces prior to a renovation. What'd she do? She took dust samples from vacuums, from desktops, from windowsills, and tested those dust samples for those 6 classes of chemicals that we're trying to avoid. And what did she find? Highly elevated traces of these chemicals. Y'all, these materials have been installed 10, 15 years ago. They're still in the air that we're breathing. So Dr. Anna Young went into those spaces through the Harvard Healthy Building Academy and replaced flooring, furniture, and paint. Let the spaces acclimate, gave it 3 or 4 months, came back and did the same testing of those dust samples, and about 85 to 90% reduction in these 6 classes of chemicals in the same space, simply by changing the interior finishes of those spaces. So we think about acoustics. How do we start designing spaces for higher levels of concentration, for participation in the workplace? How do we start to think of the material choices that we make that are going to affect the productivity of the people we design for as well through acoustics? And then design. How do we look at design and colors that might create higher energy in spaces where it's needed, maybe lower energy in subdued spaces? And then moisture and cleanability. How do we design products that do not need these harmful chemicals in the maintenance? Whatever happened to just cleaning products with water? So how do we look at all of these different human experiences and these impacts based on the choices we make of how things are designed? Let's go to the next one. All of these things are happening because of leaders like you in Portland, right? You're translating these personal values and unleashing this creativity and having these conversations with manufacturers. And the good news is, like I said earlier, this is not just happening in Portland, Seattle, and San Francisco. These questions are happening and this change is happening all over the country. You go to the next one. So how do you incorporate these into your values? So let's not talk about what we do every day when we go to work. I want you to think to yourself in your personal life. How do you think about health and well-being and climate change in your personal life? What kind of, do you think about maybe the car that you drive or choose not to drive? Is that decision made on some values that you have maybe around climate change? What about any clothing brands that you associate yourself with? Do you think about maybe where it was made, how it was made, who made this, what it's made of? Do you make those choices based on your personal values? What about your relationship to food? You look at ingredients and think about what impact it has on your life, your family, your children. Do you think about where it was grown, how it was grown, who grew it? Maybe we think about the packaging. Can it be recycled? I try to. When we make those choices based on your values, think about those choices and then what we do at scale professionally. If we can translate those values, our personal values, into our professional lives, the amount of square feet and the amount of spend that's simply in this CEU today has the ability to create massive change. So how do we translate our personal values into our professional lives with these impacts? We can go to the next one. So I got this Rubik's Cube up here because this is going to be, it's hard, right? And there's more than just one issue we have to address. We can't just say that we're just going to solve one side of this cube and think we've solved the whole thing. The challenges that are in front of us are real. It's climate change, it's chemicals of concern, it's waste, diversity, equity, and inclusion. How do we start to address all the choices that we make so we're not focused on simply solving one side of the cube, but we're solving the bigger problem? And the next slide we'll go into is how do we try to translate that through the work of Cradle to Cradle? So Cradle to Cradle is not just, we can go to the next slide. Cradle to Cradle is not just a built environment certification. Cradle to Cradle is a third-party recognized certification that is moving mountains in apparel, whether it's high-end with Stella McCarthy or fast fashion with HW. I think they just released about 5 years ago a Cradle to Cradle certified $8 fast fashion t-shirt with no chemicals of concern that's biodegradable. I think of the work that L'Oreal is doing to get orthophthalates chemicals out of cosmetics. So Cradle to Cradle is all around us. It's not just a built environment certification. We can go to the next one. So when you think about Cradle to Cradle, it's more than just a product certification. So that when that manufacturer achieves Cradle to Cradle, it is not their finish line, it's their starting line. Cradle to Cradle is a certification that has to be renewed every 2 years and show constant improvement. We can go to the next slide in all 5 of these attributes. Cradle to Cradle is a certification that gives you design signals about material health, recycling, climate change, water, and social fairness. So let's go to the next slide. And I promised that I was going to do my best not to talk about the science of Cradle to Cradle, but to the design signals of Cradle to Cradle. So I'm going to start with material health with a quote from my friend Paula McAvoy from Perkins and Will. It's like, as a design professional, she goes, do you know how hard it is to design a hospital with no carcinogens, or to design a school with no reproductive toxicity or endocrine disruption? So as materials are the skin of our interiors and have a direct impact on our health and well-being. So Cradle to Cradle is a certification that goes beyond just, these are my ingredients, it's not this. Cradle to Cradle is a much deeper dive. So if a product has a Cradle to Cradle certification, it's where a third party has assessed this product at 100 parts per million per each ingredient. Not 100 parts per million of the product, per each ingredient. So it's at the molecular level. The first thing they do is they screen that against the Cradle to Cradle restrictive substance list, which is thousands of CAS numbers of chemicals. Can't have these. But then they take it a step further and they screen it against 24 things that we care about, or that I hope we care about. They screen it against the risk and hazards of 24 human health endpoints to eliminate the risk and hazards of carcinogens and reproductive toxicity, endocrine disruption, aquatic toxicity, gene mutation. So is Cradle to Cradle that design signal that tells us that we are specifying materials that are not part of a bigger problem, but part of a solution? And then in the next slide, if you've read Cradle to Cradle, comes across as a book about recycling. It is, it's good. But as design professionals, I want to apologize because I think you have been overpromised and underdelivered when it's come to this work around circular economy. You have heard words like, hey, don't worry, this is recyclable, this has a take-back program. Well, if that all that was true, why aren't we doing the work? Right? Our industry is responsible for 160 million tons of landfill consumption. We take out of the planet, we make products, and then we waste. Lineal economy. Cradle to Cradle validates the work that this material has been doing, that it is being recycled, that it was designed for recycling, designed for disassembly, not demolition, that it actually has a process in place for the reverse distribution of the product. Every 2 years, that company has to prove that it is actually recycling this material. So we can wait to the end and try to fix a problem from a really big pipe, or we can start today to say that we are going to specify into circular economies And Cradle to Cradle could be that design signal that gives your projects opportunities to participate in a circular economy. We go to the next slide. So now we know material health, what's in the product, that it's safe for human health, that it can be recycled. What about the product's relationship to climate change? And Cradle to Cradle identifies the operational carbon footprint of where the product was made and also the embodied carbon footprint that the product is. So every 2 years, a manufacturer has to show an increase in the use of renewable energy and a decrease in its carbon management program. It has to show a reduction in the embodied carbon footprint of those products as well. So Cradle to Cradle is also that design signal that lets you know that this product and the work it's doing against our collective fight against climate change. And the next slide. So I don't think this is talked about enough, but water. What is your project's relationship to water? Your choice's relationship to water? So unfortunately, I don't live in Columbus, Ohio anymore. In Portland any longer. I live in Columbus, Ohio. It's about 7 or 8 years ago that the city of Toledo had its water shut down for 48 hours. A major city. That's like saying, like, hey, Salem, you don't have water for 2 days because it's been contaminated. A lot of manufacturing, Detroit, Northeast or Northwest Ohio. So Cradle to Cradle is a certification that doesn't only tell you that this product, this company, manufacturer, shows a reduction in water intensity, but also certifies the effluent that it releases back into the ecosystem. So think about this, tie water to material health. If those chemicals of concern are not in the manufacturing process, they're also not in the effluent that's released into the ecosystem. And then the last, next slide of Cradle to Cradle. And I think there'll be a lot of silver linings that come out of these past 2.5, 3 years ago of what we've been through. But if someone wanted to talk to me about sustainability, they wanted to know about how we made things and what we made. But more and more customers today want to know more about who we are. Products are made on the backs of lives of people, humans. And Cradle to Cradle is a third-party certification that certifies the social fairness of not just the four walls of that manufacturer, but the supply chain of that product, to let you know that this product was made in a supply chain committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, community involvement, made in a healthy building, paying a fair wage. So Cradle to Cradle is about all 5 of these attributes. And you can't achieve Cradle to Cradle if you just achieve one of them. You have to achieve all 5. So let's go to the next slide. So, excuse me, I do this for a living. I probably could have put 50 more icons on this page, right? So you're navigating all these choices. So we have, there's Singapore Green, which is the Singapore. We've got the SCA, which is the Scandinavian Building Certification, Living Building, AIA 2030 Challenge. What is unique to Cradle is that it participates and is recognized by all of these building programs all over the world. So let's go to the next and see how it plays into our programs here locally. So whether it be BREEAM, whether it be LEED, whether it be WELL, whether it be, this isn't on this slide, but Green Health Approved recognizes this. The city of San Francisco recognizes this. Google recognizes Cradle to Cradle. It's a globally recognized program that helps meet your project's goals. We can go to the next slide. So that easy button of saying, hey, Christine, how much recycled content do you have? And then you ask, totally up that point from LEED is gone. So now the building disclosure and optimization credit, this MR credit, design professionals will need to specify 20 products from at least 5 different manufacturers that have either or a combination of Cradle to Cradle, HPD, or Declare. So you could specify 12 Cradle to Cradle products, 6 products that have an HPD, 2 products that have a Declare label. You've achieved that point. But now you also know more about all the choices that you make. You know more about material transparency. You know more about these things simply by getting into these questions. We can go to the next slide. Thank goodness we've got this new, and I think in the new version, Lead 5, there will be a circular products credit. It's an innovation credit today. So how are we specifying buildings today that can participate in a circular economy tomorrow? And Cradle to Cradle is recognized as a way to participate in this work for this innovation with USGBC and LEED. We can go to the next one. Then we've got this new opportunity, whether you're going for a well building certification or not, but look at these features. What a great opportunity to get into conversations to talk about enhanced material safety, material transparency, promoting product disclosure, selecting optimized materials that have eliminated these chemicals of concern, looking at cleaning protocols so that we don't have to have harmful chemicals in the maintenance of the spaces we design. What a great opportunity to dive into these human value questions. We can go to the next one. So I talked about this before, Green Health approved, right? Whether it be Providence, Adventist Hospital, whether it be OHSU, we want to look at Green Health approved because we want to put materials in your spaces that have been recognized by leaders of our industry and healthcare without harm to be choices that are part of a greater solution. So what a great opportunity to have this conversation with customers and really validate this from a human health and well-being standpoint. Next slide. So I know Sarah signed this. I know ZGF has signed this. I think really I was at a meeting at maybe at Bora. I want to say about 10 years ago, and they said, maybe we should try something like this. I think it was Bora. So we got the AIA 2030 challenge, right? Thousands of firms have said, we need to change the way we practice. And from that came the AIA 2030 material pledge. It says, we as a design firm, we as ZGF, we as Sarah have signed this, and that we are committed to making material selections that are committed to human health, circular economy, climate health, ecosystem health, social equity, right? That's what we stand for. But if I lay those goals of the 2030 challenge on top of, they are in harmony and in concert with the Cradle to Cradle attributes. So is Cradle to Cradle a way to really follow through on those commitments with the AIA 2030 challenge? Let's go to the next one. We can go to the next one. So the good news is people are doing this work. The sky's not falling, projects are happening, they're on time, they're on budget, they're performing at high levels. And the first company that comes to mind is Google. It is safe to say, excuse me, I would say in my opinion, the work that Google has done has made every segment in interior finishes better companies. Your furniture today, your flooring today, your paint today is better off because of the work and the collaboration that Google has done. But Google doesn't want to just solve one problem. Right? They're looking at every side of that cube. And as Andrea says, is you can offset carbon, but you can't offset health. As Robin Bass from Google says, the last thing we want to do at Google is to specify a gallon of carbon neutral lead paint. They are looking at the choices they make through that material pledge and look at Cradle to Cradle as that trusted third party and how they develop their standards. We can go to the next one. And Google's collaborated with Harvard. And I've mentioned the work that Dr. Joe Allen and Anna Young have done. But the Healthy Building Academy at Harvard has dove in and they've created the Harvard Healthy Campus Initiative specifications. I believe it's in up to 13 finishes. If anyone's going to Greenbuild, Heather is going to present at Greenbuild, you can hear that. But Heather doesn't want to just eliminate orthophthalates or PFAS or halogenated flame retardants in the 28 million square feet of Harvard's built environment. Her goal is to eliminate the manufacturing of these chemicals altogether. So Harvard has done the research, has done the science, and are willing to share these specifications with anyone willing to listen. And what do they see as their trusted third party is Cradle to Cradle. And then the next one, City of San Francisco. In fact, City of San Francisco, it's Eden Berkman. If anyone knows Eden, when I was a rep in Portland, Oregon, she was the librarian. It's Sarah. And I remember she was like one of the first designers that asked me about this thing called recycled content. So Laura now leads the City of SF Sustainability Department. Excuse me. So I'd say about 6 years ago now, City of San Francisco created a new flooring specification that all carpet must be free of these 6 classes of chemicals, right? Also must be cradle to cradle certified. So what are they doing? They're looking at their built environment and specifying healthy materials today, and everything that's been installed in their facilities is cradle to cradle. What does that portfolio look like in another 2 years as leases start to come up? The impacts are tens, hundreds of thousands of pounds of landfill diversion. And by recycling material back into more material, reductions in carbon footprints. So they looked at how they specified and how they sourced materials today to create different impacts. And what did they see as their third party is cradle to cradle. So in the last slide, the good news is that we are all here and that we're having this conversation. The good news is I was able to get into this work because of leaders like you all in Portland, Oregon. And it's those choices, right? Every choice we have, it adds up. Like I always say that, we don't own the carpet tile or the flooring that you make or the furniture you make. And you don't own, that furniture, but you specify it. But the one thing that we do own is our choices. The choices of how we make things and the choices of how you design things. And can we start to accept the opportunity and the responsibility of these choices to start to address these impacts that we collectively share? So that's what I've got for the CEO. Sorry, I went off script a lot. That's because y'all are in Portland and I was pretty excited. So anybody have any ideas or questions?
Doesn't look like we have any in the chat yet, but we do have one here for you. So, Tim, sometimes helping the environment and doing what's right can feel daunting. If there's one small thing that we could do today, what would that be?
It does feel daunting, but I also think that at times we get the word hard confused with the word different. So maybe change, if there's one thing, I would say don't go into your library and try to do a complete overhaul of everything. I'm going to use Heather at Harvard and Robin at Google. They wasted years trying to address everything at once. So I would say start with one segment. Like I'm going to focus on furniture. I'm going to focus on flooring. I'm going to focus on paint. And I'm going to get really, really good at the impact in the outcomes of the choices that I make in these segments. Right? Start with one and get really good at it. And I will tell you that when you see that it was just a little bit different, it wasn't as hard. When you feel like you're doing something about it, you get more empowered to can keep moving on. So I would say start with one and tell all your friends in your studio, start to talk to your clients about it. And then I think that's how you start to get bandwidth.
Great. So one other one we had here is, how do we ensure that sustainable design is not just for the few that can afford it, or that doesn't negatively affect others?
Can we say the CEU is officially over?
Yeah.
All right, cool. CEU is officially over. And that's a great question because clean air, clean waters, healthy materials should not be a privilege. They should be a right. 90% of what we make at Shaw is cradle to cradle certified. So I would say from the best looking ugly things that we make to the highest end products that we make, the story of cradle to cradle is in our DNA. Right. So I can say that confidently with our soft surface and our carpet. We're not there yet in resilient. We're getting there. We're making it better. We do have cradle to cradle resilient options. We are doing some things domestically with resilient flooring, making that better. I'll use the city of San Francisco as an example. When Eden wrote that specification, there were only 3 manufacturers that could meet that specification. Selfishly, 2 of them were us, me, Charles, Packcraft. Now there's 5, right? And those manufacturers aren't just making California products; it's all their products.
Okay, thank you. Those are 2 that we had. Did anybody else have any questions?
I was gonna see if Tim could maybe, since carbon is such a hot topic here in Portland and in general right now, you want to kind of touch maybe just briefly on the differences of the types of carbon operational versus embodied, and kind of maybe give your 2 cents on that.
Yeah, my first 2 cents, and this is just a play on words. Christine, you said carbon is a really hot topic. Literally, it really is. Maybe a different choice of words. That's something I picked up on. So let's start with this. So we get fired up. Christine gets fired up to do a project with you. You're at Ankrum, you're doing a lead project, and we do this work, but it really doesn't translate to the impacts because we've looked at buildings as a whole. But now clients want to know, what is the carbon footprint of all the different choices we make? All right, what's the carbon footprint of the carpet tile, the ceiling tile, the steel, the aluminum, the glass? And now we have transparency that we can say, hey, Danielle Johnson, it's Sarah, this is the carbon footprint of our product, and Danielle can now start to make choices on that. So that's the carbon footprint, right? The carbon footprint is the carbon footprint is the carbon footprint. You cannot change the carbon footprint by purchasing offsets. So with Packcraft, I'll use compare ourselves to ourselves. So the EcoWorks carpet tile that Christine, you may have worked with her on 5, 6, 7 years ago. Maybe my brother Tom, you specified some material. The carbon footprint of those EcoWorks carpet tiles were somewhere around 12 to 13 kilograms of greenhouse gas per square yard. Today, that product is at about 4.5 to 5 kilograms of greenhouse gas per square yard. Some of the lowest in the industry, some of the lowest in the world. But our goal is to continue to do the work to reduce the carbon footprint of things. So now if we know that a product has a carbon footprint of 4.5, then we buy 4.5 worth of Green E certified offsets to make the claim that the product is also carbon neutral. So if you remember anything about Christine's question, I can tell you that our goal is to buy less offsets. If we were a company that all we were doing was buying less offsets and not working to reduce the carbon footprint, shame on us. That's not who we are. So offsets are needed, right? That's investing in what could be the next photovoltaic or wind farm or geo methane capture. So we need those. It is funding those programs. But our goal is to reduce the carbon footprint so that we buy less offsets. So in the carbon neutral claims, by the way, there's a great, if anybody watches John Oliver, he did a thing on carbon offsets about 3 weeks ago. You should watch it. My advice would be when people say, hey, this product's carbon neutral, ask them what the carbon footprint is. What if we had a carbon footprint of like 90 kilograms of greenhouse gas per square yard and we were just simply buying offsets? So Christine, I think it would be a great opportunity to follow up with everybody on this call and send them our Packcraft sustainability report card and show them how this piece of marketing material simplifies the work for you all, but hopefully triggers smarter conversations that we have with you.
Absolutely. Happy to share that. We're excited to have the report card. And I'm going to find that John Oliver thing to share too. I think that's
it's on HBO.
Yep. It's really good. I was about to mention it because everything you were saying, Tim, I just kept on having like flashbacks to the, everybody purchasing carbon offsets, but not really doing anything to make their processes better. So I really appreciated you mentioning that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, our goal is not to have to buy these offsets. We're not just going to keep polluting and just feel good about ourselves because we bought offsets.
Right.
Like the idea of
100%.
improving what we're doing so that you're making a difference in multiple areas. And yeah, I appreciate that a lot. Awesome.
All right. Listen, hopefully next time we do this, I'll be in person. But great to see Portland continue to do this work. And I promise that if you continue to ask us hard questions, that your answer is going to be yes, or that we'll try. So let's keep working.
Thank you so much for your time
Cool.
today. Really
See
appreciate
you.
it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jim.
Bye. I think final closing remarks for anybody else still on here. Again, Christine is keeping track of the CEU information. We'll be using the list again, like she said, that you should have entered in when you registered. But if you have any issues, feel free to contact her. Also, if you have any questions in general or want to get connected more with Tim on anything in specific that you didn't feel like you could ask here amongst us, our group, we'll be happy to pass along that information. Yeah, whatever you need, we're here.
Thank you, everyone. Good rest of your afternoon.